There's so many beautiful things out there that we don't photograph, that we don't think that other people want to see.
The voice of my guest a moment ago, Christopher Herwig. We're walking in woodland today, just for a little cover where I can manage it, because it is. Guess what? Will it be raining again now? Yes, it's raining again. Cue the next song. Who was that? Supertramp. 2 marks. I've brought along for thingy bobs and giggles my X Pro 1 today to make some sketchbook pictures. Should probably start with making one immediately. A bit harder because, of course, it's all fingers and thumbs when you're working it in a very manual sense. But there's a tree stump up here that I can put your letters on, so nothing has to get too wet. There we go. Put that down and draw out the X Pro 1. Now, I do have to manually focus this because I've got a Yashica lens on it. What are we at? We're at ISO 400, 60th of a second. We're on f8. I do love the way this camera renders the greens. Right, manually focus. Move myself into the gap and look into the chaos of the scene ahead of me. Trees have come down in the wind from the last storm. A silver birch right next to a beautiful, what is that? Is that a birch next to it? I think it might be. Anyway, Bowdown Woods bomb site. That's where we're walking. It's not officially called the bomb site, so named because it was an ammunition store during and after the Second World War, but nature has come along and said, if you finish messing about with this place, can we have it back now, please? Thanks very much. And, well, it's thrived. You do have these old concrete tracks here and there, or what would have been roads, I would imagine, and sometimes you come across what looks like a sort of railway platform. I guess they could have been loading platforms for trucks. And here and there are mounds which I think were blast mounds. Where does this path lead? I don't know. Let's just take it. Lots of birch, lots of oak, lots of birch and oak, lots of birch. It's another rainy walk, minus the barking machine. He sends his regards. He's gone for a less boggy walk with his girlfriend, and this is quite boggy today. I've just found a bit of a problem, actually. There's a hole in my boot. Dear lower, dear lower. There's a hole in my boot. Dear lower, a hole. Then fix it, dear. I can't. I've no idea how to fix this. The rubber has just it's come apart from the bottom of the boot. They're not that old. I mean, I've had them. How long have we been doing this program? What, 3 years or so? Not long. You'd expect this boot to last for longer. Don't know. I might take it to Timpson's, see what they can do. Other boot menders are available. But this is a problem, he says, shoehorning. Do you like what I've done there? Shoehorning in my guest, Christopher Herwig, today. This is a problem that Christopher surely didn't have as he walked some, well, at times, very foreboding landscapes, often in inclement weather in order to make pictures of bus stops. Yes, today's a story of obsession. To make pictures of bus stops. Christopher travelled former Soviet republics from Ukraine to Uzbekistan, Armenia to Far East and Siberia, and all points in between in a decades-long bus stop treasure hunt across, well, some say 18,000 miles. And some say 50,000 kilometres. The two are not the same, clearly. But you may be saying, or at least asking, why? Or possibly a 3-letter acronym that starts with the letter W. So, I'll attempt to tell you. These bus stops, these Soviet bus stops, are just, well, incredible for the can you have an ostentationness? Can you have that at times? But then also for their complete absurdity. At other times, they're loved and loathed in equal measure in the countries where they stand. Some seem embarrassed by these Soviet follies. But you can't help but wonder how these things, which are in every single way, shape and form art installations, how they ever got the go-ahead. When everything and everyone, I thought, at particular times in history anyway, in the Soviet Union, had to follow very strict principles in terms of what was permissible. There are some political points made, or at least recounted, or observed is probably better, within the show, lightly, but also reverently, given the troubles of that region geopolitically. But this isn't a show about politics. This is a show about pictures, and this is a project that has captured the imagination of, book buyers the world over, and photographers who've doubtless, like me, marvelled at the simplicity of a photographic project that comes completely out of the blue and says, I think this is what you've been looking for your entire life. And I love that about this particular work. And I hope that comes across in our conversation. You clearly hear, even toward the end of the chat that I have today, my attempt to steer Christopher to talk perhaps on matters of other photographic work. It all comes straight back to the bus stops, which gives me an excuse, hopefully, to talk to him another time about his extraordinary portfolio. As the Design Boom website says, and I shall link to it on the show page today, constructed as subtle acts of ingenuity amidst pervasive state control, these Soviet bus stops stand as testaments to individual creativity. And they are. Bus stops that look like small stadiums. Stops in the shape of a rolling wave. Bus stops that look like, they look like an alien spacecraft to me, or perhaps a house that you might have on the moon. And that's the amazing thing. It's open to interpretation with some of these. You could easily pick them up and move them into, insert big important museum of art here and call them one-off installations with a sort of price tag only people who have the surname Saatchi can afford.
Today on the Photowalk,
We get inundated with so much visual, so much information, what we think is cool, what we think is beautiful. We forget to open our eyes and discover stuff for ourselves. It was just such a fun thing. And it was, for me, I think it was the greatest exercise in photography I'd ever done and probably ever have done. We look so much to others and to, likes and approval. And then everything just starts to kind of blend together and be what other people want, what else has been created. There's a safety in that. What is it to be an explorer? What is it to be an adventurer? And for me, I had to go through incredible challenges to sometimes find and get these bus stops. It's a bus stop made out of wood that can fit 2 people in it. But I felt like I just found the new world.
That's Christopher Herwig, who is today's guest. And before I give you a flavour of what's in today's mailbag, thank you to our extra milers and MPB who sponsor this show and keep it here week on week. MPB or mpb.com as a website is where you can safely buy and sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online and become a part of the circular economy. Right now, as camera bodies are currently in high demand, MPB has increased the amount you can get paid for your camera. And here's how that works. You go online to mpb.com, click the button at the very top of the website that says Start Selling and Trading, and just follow the easy instructions where you're prompted to enter the model name and click a box for the condition of the kit. From there, your gear is collected from your front door, and then MPB pays you for your camera gear within days. And here's a bonus. If the kit is in better condition than expected, they'll automatically increase the amount you get paid. The average seller earns £700 each time they sell to MPB. There is a link on the website page today, and you can follow that to the website. On the show then today, a call out to and for our Hungarian friends. Solo photographic breaks with lashings of goulash. What, Neil? Goulash. Perhaps not the stew and dumpling currency of every country, but we'll talk about it. We also chat about the Hebrides, find a photo of a shopping trolley that's gone viral in Canada land, and reintroduce some to their past through the humble and international currency of a Garibaldi biscuit. And it's the first Friday of the month, so it's assignment week. A challenge for a picture that today's guest, Chris Herwig, would like you to make at some stage over the next month. And while I think about it, the music you hear during the show today, the pieces going in and out of part one and then the music into part two, they're all pieces of music from the film that is out in some regions simply called Soviet Bus Stops. I'll talk about it more with Christopher during our chat. The album is linked to on the website today as well, on the show page. But I thought it would make sense to have music from the soundtrack of the film. It's quite ethereal and really quite different to much of the music we use. So I think it's perfect to set the scene for the photos and the project that we talk about on today's show. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots with a hole, check. And a bus timetable for the number 22 from Makatiev Street to Market Barlik in Kazakhstan. Yes, it does exist. I looked it up. Let's walk. I'm having to navigate my way around some of the paths. Normally I just slosh through it with the boot, but with a hole in the boot, I would just end up taking on water. Quick, man the lifeboats. Oh, going through the bramble. Hang on, that's... excuse me. Can I have my leg back? Thanks very much. If you'd like to write into the show, you'll hear some letters today. That's what this show is all about. Letters from you, where you're walking, where you've been, the stories that you're making. That's what makes this podcast very different to other photography podcasts. Then I'd love to hear from you. Write into stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. Hang on, I've got to jump onto this wooden platform. There we go. And if you're sending pictures in, please send them. If you can manage to resize to 2,500 pixels wide, and do the heavy lifting for me, that would be very, very appreciated. If you can't, don't worry, I'll do the heavy lifting for you. But send your pictures in to that same address, stories@photowalk.show. Pictures of where you've been, stories of the places that you've been visiting, perhaps projects that you've been making in very much the same way as we're talking about today with Christopher Herwig. I appreciate probably not bus stops for the Soviet Union, but all the different shapes and sizes of projects that you make, I'm truly fascinated about. Right, a quick mention, just to prove I get to everything eventually. This one is from Laszlo Pear. How are you? I hope you're well, Laszlo. I'm jumping across stuff here. Bear with me. I'm pretty sure, says Laszlo, I'm your one and only Hungarian listener. That's me. Respect from Laszlo. And that was it. That was the message. I did go online, actually, Laszlo, to see if that's true. And no, there are more than just single-digit figures. There's a few more of you, it would seem. So I would like some Hungarian photo stories, please. I know it's a beautiful country. In fact, Laszlo did send me some film pictures because that's what he's into, and I'll pop those on the show page today, of course. Now, years ago. I've chosen the most marshy route. Here we go. Now, years ago, actually, Sam bought me a ticket. It was a Christmas present to go to Hungary, to Budapest in particular, as a photo adventure. I'm not quite sure what she was suggesting because she just bought me a ticket. It was a solo ticket. It was a return, yes. It was like, go on, here's the ticket. Be off, would you, for at least a week. And I did. And it was fantastic. I had a wonderful time. I did go at a very, very cold time of the year. Budapest was very, very cold, very snowy and very stewy. What I mean by that is I ate a lot of stew. It seemed to be all I did. It was stew after stew. Goulash, actually. Not stew, it's called goulash, isn't it? God, this is getting worse. It's called goulash in Hungary. It's the national dish. It's a broth, it's beef usually, heavily seasoned with paprika. Unlike, I did look this up, unlike the American version, which is a quick dish made from ground beef, tomato sauce, herbs and noodles. My mum's version actually took on a slightly different approach. It had lots of dumplings with it, so although I wasn't a big fan, I must admit, Mum said, what are we having for tea tonight? And Mum would say goulash. I thought, ooh, goulash? I mean, goulash has got the same sort of, it sounds the same, doesn't it, as yoghurt. Is it not a very attractive sounding word? Goulash. What have we got for tea? Goulash. Goulash? Oh, no, not goulash. The dumplings did save it. Actually, goulash now, though, is one of my favourite meals. But it is served everywhere, it seemed. When I went to Budapest, trying to say it with a faintly local twist. They eat it morning, noon, night, and through the night. In fact, I'm sure if you'd have opened your hotel door in the middle of the night, there would have been a man standing out there with a plate of goulash. Would you like some goulash? Oh, thanks very much. Don't mind if I do. At 3 a.m. Anyway, Budapest is the sort of place that I would like to go and do one of my new Photowalk films in. I'm going to talk about that on the Extra Mile, actually. It's the 9th largest city in the European Union by population, and it's the largest city on the Danube River. I took my new misbehaving Leica M8, and new to me at the time anyway, I made some pictures around the city, lots of tram pictures. I'm quite partial to a tram picture. And then plenty of pictures of the magnificent Parliament building. And then right next to the Danube, I went to a church in a cave, a very small cave, right next to the Danube. Somebody that no doubt was selling me goulash in the morning suggested that I go past it, and I did. I went to visit. It's on the Buda side of Budapest. You see, there's two sides. Buda, which is, I think, the hilly side, and Pest, which is I'm sure I've got this the right way round, which is the less hilly side, the flatter side. That's why it's called Budapest, you see? Two parts to the story. There's a lot of midges around here today as well. Cool, you, Neil. You're a moan a minute today. Boots, midges, bog, I know. But on the Buda side, tucked into right into the side, there's Gellert Hill. See, that is right. Buda is the hilly side, which is named after a saint who was, this doesn't sound very nice, but I'll read it as it is, stuffed into a spiked barrel and rolled down the hill. That's another story. In a small cave, this church is, with a large cross above it. People believe it was once home to a hermit monk who was part of an order called the Pauline monks. And I made some pictures in the cave. I'm going to try and find them. Maybe I could put them on the show page if I find them. They are a bit long lost, actually, on a drive from a good few years back. But I'll have a go. I'll have an attempt. And it was a fascinating church to visit and take pictures. It's a very, very small church, very dark, low light with my misbehaving M8, which I mentioned in the YouTube film, which I made about the Fujifilm, the new Fujifilm X106. Have you seen it yet? Ding! I'll leave a link. This cave is fascinating, but it is very dark. So the M8 wasn't we didn't behave well in the dark, that's for sure. So I sort of leant against the inside of the cave and made some pictures. The history behind the cave is fascinating, actually. It's only the 50s, when, would it be the late 50s, when the monks were all banished from those following the Pauline order were all banished from the cave. I believe one was actually, I think the leader, I'm guessing a bit now, really. I should have checked my facts on this. Pretty sure that he was executed. The rest of them were banished, and they actually covered this cave with meters and meters of concrete. And then when the Soviet Union, see, there is a link here. when the Soviet Union, when that all ended, when Hungary went independent, they uncovered this cave, and now you can go and visit it. Fascinating place, really is. That was supposed to be a short story, wasn't it? So hang on, let's have a bit of separation music before the next piece. Something a bit Hungarian, please, shall we? Yes, why not? something that would go well with goulash. And I shall try and climb this. I don't know why I've come right down to where the stream is, because it's really boggy here. I'm going to try and climb, get a little bit higher, so I can make some pictures of loosely the valley below me. Hungarian music, please. Goulash. Oh, lots of lashings of it. Oh, I could do with some goulash now. That would be nice. Goulash while we're walking. Fantastic. There's what looks like to be some sort of bird hide here. I think that's what it is. Let me get a picture of it. Hold on. Put my letters down there. As I say, X-Pro 1 today with my vintage lens firmly affixed. What have we got? f5.6, 1/2/5. It's got a little bit lighter. Let's just check the focus here. This is manually focused. Just making some sketchbook images to show you where I've been walking today. There we go. Small bird hide. That could be the start of a project. Bird hides. Oh, I don't think it's going to take on quite the majesty of the Soviet bus stops project, Neil. Probably not, no. So, a letter here from Paul Cooper. Let's get to the bird hide. Can I get in it, Paul? Let me have a look. Yeah, oh. It looks like it's definitely a bird hide, yeah. Size of a Wendy house. And leaning precariously somewhat down the hill. I'll not be sitting in that. Right, letter from Paul Cooper. Neil. Ooh, I think I'm in trouble. There's no salutation in sight here. Either that or, Paul, are you a lawyer? Quick, hide under the covers. It wasn't me, it was them. Many weeks ago, says Paul. This started as a spoof letter to Sir Barkalot from my 2 spaniels, but it's somehow evolved. I've been listening to the Photowalk for some time. In fact, right from the start, when it transitioned out of the Fujicast at the end of that event that shall not be mentioned. And I must admit, it's one of my weekly listening highlights. It's very kind of you, Paul. Several weeks ago, I took the step to enroll on the Extra Mile, and I've been catching up on the earlier episodes, as well as sitting in on the live Zoom call. Ah, Paul, we have another one, of course, coming up Tuesday for our northern and southern hemisphere listeners. I shall keep a lookout for you. I must admit, says Paul, I thought your initial more monologues. Now these are in the on the Extra Mile channel. If you go back far enough, you'll find a load of monologues, almost diary pieces about photography that I wrote. I think they were superb in the spirit of the likes of Alistair Cook. No, really, don't mention me in the same sentence as Alistair. He was a genius. And I'm a very, very fond fan of the late, brilliant journalist Alistair Cook with Letter from America. It's one of my favourite programmes ever. Certainly, I don't feel I should be mentioned in the same breath, although I would like to have shared a plate of goulash with him on the travels that he used to take. Although actually, the programmes were all recorded, I think, overlooking Central Park. I shall look that up and check my facts on that before I perhaps mention it in the Extra Mile. But yeah, thank you for that. He made the programme for just a bit of Alistair Cook history, some facts. He made a programme, he was a journalist, made a programme for 58 years. That's incredible. There were thousands and thousands of episodes, and they covered every major news event in the United States since, between 1946, I think he made his first in 46, and it was the early 2000s when he eventually finished. And it included things like JFK's assassination, the Challenger explosion, the terrorist attacks, 9/11, many stories across those thousands and thousands of episodes. He was a British, a very English bloke, actually. Had this very, very rich, all-knowing, very RP, received pronunciation, BBC presentation and pronunciation. And it was, I can describe his style audibly as delicious. Anyway, back to Paul. They must have taken ages to create your moors, and I understand why things have evolved. I must be slightly older than you, but the words struck so many points with me, and when I shared them with my wife, it spurred a lot of discussions. Oh my word, I shall have to listen back. What were we talking about? The Gardermoen one had me in tears. Gardermoen, by the way, is the airport at Oslo. I was a programme director delivering systems to Posten Nord, the postal service. And that was part of my life for 5.5 years. Every Monday night, I would fly into Oslo, return home Thursday, and then drive from Heathrow to Derbyshire in the early hours of Friday morning, and be on a client call at 0800 Oslo time once again. It's a fabulous airport, although in those days it would have been a different one. It's been updated, hasn't it? It's very, very, very green. I would also say ecologically sound. I might almost say ecologically sound if it weren't for the fact it's an airport. Your trips to the Isle of Wight, they made me smile. My oldest son has made it his home. He lives in Upton Cross above Ryde, where his wife runs a very busy eco-agricultural business. Much has changed since then, but back in 2009, my wife, Jane, and I decided that we would follow our heart and visit all of the Hebrides Isles and the Northern Isles connected by ferry services. I would imagine your connection between the Isle of Wight and the Hebrides was the ferry, yes? Because we've suddenly schlepped a good few hundred miles. It was not to be a compromise of diving in, ticking the box and just diving off, but have sufficient time to understand the island, its residents, and explore the landscape and seascapes, and for me to photograph the island. We've got called to the dark side several times where we've hovered about moving on, gone back to the same island several times, and even contemplated a move there. But employment in global logistics and ageing parents made that a step too far. So we've made multiple trips to several of the islands, and we're still to complete the list. What a photographic project. So what's my rambling about? Question mark, question mark. I'm not panicking, Paul. I'm sure you have a plan. I have, says Paul, all of the images that I've taken on these visits, and the best of them are already in PowerPoints, which I've used on club photographic talks. This is a journey, he says, through life. That's what having your camera is about, isn't it? That's what we're going to learn today, actually, from Christopher as well. I suggest that here's your plan. I suggest that on the March Zoom, see, a plan coming together. I think you're about to mention that you'd like to show some of these pictures, yes? I suggest, says Paul, that I show 3 of the images and you can see how I present. And if you think there's legs in the approach, we can move on and I'll do a longer show. Well, Paul, I love the pictures you've sent in so much. I need no persuasion. And funnily enough, we are missing our speaker for this march. We have a speaker. The one that we do for the Northern Hemisphere, we have a speaker who does a sort of 10 to 15 minute presentation and pulls some pictures in their life or projects or whatever they're working on. And this month we are devoid of that speaker. I can't remember. Maybe one cancelled and moved to another date. I think that's what might have happened. So Paul, if you're up for it, and the extra mile is you've got a bit of notice now, stand by for a treat of pictures from the Hebrides. I shall share 3 of Paul's incredible photographs on the show page today. And I think you'll see that you're in for a treat when we all get together and start talking about photography on Tuesday night. If you are not an extra miler, that's my way of gently, because it can cost less than the price of fancy coffee a month to belong to our extra mile. That's my opportunity to say to you, to give you a little gentle nudge, friendly nudge, and say, come and join us on the Extra Mile Zoom show this coming Tuesday, because Paul's going to be doing the talk, don't you know? Yeah, he is. Paul, you know Paul, that Paul, that's the one. I wish I had a macro with me, some wonderful mushrooms. And look at these. Fabulous. I wish I knew the names of mushrooms. Not very up on me mushrooms. Good. Don't start taking them home to eat them on toast, Neil. No, I won't. Let's put my letters down because there's a wonderful, there's some steps here. This is definitely a part of the woods I've not been to before. So there's some steps here that just they sort of meander up towards a higher path. But I like the way they twist and turn as they move upwards. So let me I call them, for those that have recently joined the podcast, these are my sketchbook images. Just me sketchbooking with a camera. Just making photographs of what I see as I meander on my walks. What have we got? 1/2/5, ISO 320. And let's get that picture there. We're on f5.6. Just one more slightly, if I push the steps just to the left a bit, make the frame a bit more interesting. There we go. See what that looks like when we get back. And for fear of labouring it, dry out my foot. I need a bit of help, please. Yes, I know, Neil, we've noticed. It really helps the show to be discovered if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I am doing that thing that Oliver Twist would have done. I'm outstretched with a bowl here. The bowl has a question in it. It says, please would you go to the Apple Podcasts app, search up the Photowalk, and then leave just a few words as a review. Well, it's up to you. I can't tell you what to do, but if you have a kindly star rating, that's obviously always welcome. It's a great podcast-sphere way to recognise us and suggest us to more people who might like to walk with us. Right, shall we go exploring? Now, I know there will be some who are more than just a touch squeamish when it comes to the geopolitical location of this story, perhaps actually. But I am parking the bus, as it were, quite strictly in terms of separating art and people from this sort of unsettled and rather grim landscape in terms of the politics of the region. But this project, which I've already introduced you to right at the start, well, it really has me intrigued. It does, on a number of levels. Firstly, as a project, it smacks of, oh yes, that's what I need to devote my life to. Secondly, it's unusual. It's very unusual. Daft in places, which is something to be celebrated, comical in places, but also deeply jigsawed to a period of history where art was, well, in some respects, and reading about art and art of the Soviet Union, in some ways, it was rather weaponized, with a small w, perhaps not even a small w actually, because the art or the arts of the former Soviet Union were very much a sort of a boastful thing, a way to pronounce to the world feelings and emotions of power. I've spent hours poring over the pictures of these bus stops. Really, I have, and I'm lucky to have seen a film that's only recently been made about it too. The photographer behind Soviet bus stops is a very well-respected international photojournalist. And you could call this his passionate project, but he's so much more than that. I'm simply fascinated to find out why you might want to spend your life chasing bus stops that aren't listed, as you'll find out, that aren't documented on any maps or a guide, that can take sometimes days, weeks to get to, only to find that, well, when you reach it, or the place where you thought it was, that it may have been torn down and only the concrete base remains. That is why I called it an obsession. This is a beautiful obsession. So here's part one of my conversation, and do go and look at the pictures on the show page today, and then follow links to where you can buy the book as well. Here's my conversation, part one, with the photographer Christopher Herwig. There's an adventurous spirit to our conversation today, Christopher, and I thank our mutual friend Alistair Humphreys for the intro, who is himself somebody who's he's used to both the accomplishment that comes through some of these adventures, and I might add discomfort as well with some of the journeys that you and he have been on. I'm sure we'll come to that in our chat, but where does this all start? A back to the start question, this quest that you have for making pictures.
I mean, I think as a photographer, my quest for making pictures, it goes way back, and when I was a kid. When could play around with my dad's camera, probably. Yeah. I think from earliest memories, and I got my own camera, I think when I was around 12 from my uncle Bruno in Germany. I was visiting him and he gave me like this Zeiss Econ, which was a fabulous camera. But I must say that my quest for taking pictures, I think I was a bit of a nerd in the beginning, which I really thrived off of the technical parts of what was in front of me, the camera, so that really, I think when I was young and had a little dark room in my closet and, was developing my own film when I was a teenager, and sort of there was this fascination between the math and the science and the magic behind it. Because I mean, not to say it's not magical today, but it felt a little bit more magical, sort of because there was this relationship between the film and the developing of it, and then waiting and then see what happens. And then you really, you were capturing something, you were creating something. I can remember a lot of the early pictures I would take. I would just go down to the, local stream and take pictures of the running water and experiment with shutter speed and like, wow, I can make the water frothy, or I can do this, or, I do this in the dark room. And so that I think I started more off as a bit of more of a technician than an artist. It was the joy of the photography that got me started on it. And then I eventually started working in photo labs and went to school to study advertising and commercial photography. So I ended up in London working as an assistant for food photography for a couple of years. And that was after school, my sort of, a good chunk of my education, I think, So we were doing ads for Sainsbury's, the packaging, and different Weight Watchers. And some of my first actual good paying jobs were like of a bottle of vodka. And then I was joking the other day looking back on that, and I think that even though it was 26 years ago, I think that was still some of my better paying jobs.
Well, so the roadmap for you really was food. At some stage, though, you took a massive left turn at the traffic lights and became an adventurer.
I think there always was a love for traveling. Yeah. And when I did end up in London and I was assisting, I was also sort of backpacking around the world. And then back then I also was fascinated with the gear. So I actually backpacked around with a 4x5 camera at the time and had boxes of sheet film and was trying to capture these moments, but looking back, it was the most awkward and contrived way to do it. It was a beautiful format in terms of the quality of the imagery, but at the same time, it didn't always afford me as much time to care about what was in front of the camera as opposed to what the camera was. And I mean, I think doing the food shots, that then you have like 2 days to control everything in your image. But when you're out on the street or when you're traveling, you don't have control of what's going to happen in front of you so much. So it's so the 4x5 did end up getting shelved, unfortunately, although it was a lot of fun. And I do crack it out every once in a while just to relive. Yeah, exactly. But then I think what changed was sort of also the opportunities that presented themselves for me. My wife, I guess it would have been in 2003, 2004, she started working for the UN in Kazakhstan. And then that started, our art being placed around the world. So there was
serendipity and there was a sliding doors moment.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you didn't go straight to Kazakhstan, as it were. You kind of went via Europe, didn't you?
Yeah, from London. My wife is Swedish, and so I decided to go and live with her in Sweden. And I was going to fly, and Ryanair was already in full swing back then. So for £5 or whatever, I could fly to Stockholm. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to fly there. And then so I go to book the ticket, and I wanted to get my bike on board with me. And it was like £100 or something ridiculous to take my bike. And then I was like, no way. There's no logic behind this. £5 for me to fly and £100 for my bike. Yeah. I'm just going to bike to Stockholm. I remember I worked my last day at the studio and I had my bike parked outside, jumped on it and left London. I'd done bike trips before. And you always think, well, this is such a great opportunity to see new things and to experience new things. And I'd bike like around Australia and in Canada and I'd always come up with nothing because I'd just be like biking and it would be like hiring and I'd look around and it was just like everyday life around you. And there was no National Geographic unicorn jumping out of a castle or something. And so I'd often just come out with nothing, having this preconceived notion of this is what makes a great photograph. And then so on this trip, I was just like, no, I'm going to force myself to take a picture of anything. Every hour, I've got to take a photograph of something.
Every hour.
while I'm biking.
Right.
And it was great because it was a distraction from the biking, and it was just such a fun thing. And it was, for me, I think it was the greatest exercise in photography I'd ever done and probably ever have done, in that I photographed things I would never photograph. I just like people's clotheslines, people's, just the way windows lined up on the side of a building, or power lines, the way they kind of, the graphics of them going across the sky, or leaves on the ground, the way they kind of came together, or just, the blurring of cars while I was driving. And this activity was just such a good exercise in realizing that there's so many beautiful things out there that we don't photograph, that we don't think that other people want to see. And then when I crossed the border, thought, okay, if I'm going to bike to Stockholm, I might as well make it interesting. So I took the long way around, and I went up through the Baltic countries and actually ended in St. Petersburg. So when I hit Lithuania, I then, like literally an hour after I crossed the border into what was the former Soviet Union, I then started seeing these bus stops.
Well, I'm going to stop you there because I don't want to launch into the bus stops just yet. And this is but I do want to mention, though, at the end of your bus stops film, I'm doing it completely out of order. There was a quote I wrote down, which I absolutely adored. And with you talking about noticing the small things in life and these being so important to you, there's a quote about being on the road. It's like music. Not only are the loud and big objects important, but also the pauses and the quiet, the small things. And that's what you found very early on, wasn't it? It's a bit of a Forrest Gump story in many respects. I just kept running, and you just kept cycling.
I mean, I think there's a lot of things to be said about that. Yeah, that kind of Forrest Gump also mentality, or that outlook on life.
Yes,
where it is these little things, these little joys, and I think that is, and also to go back to our common friend Alistair. He's also in the last, several years sort of reevaluated on what is adventure, what is discovery, what is, what is important, and how can we find that in the things just around us, in these little small things. And you don't have to be an adventurer climbing Mount Everest to get that feeling, or to go through that exercise. Yeah. I think it's very therapeutic. I think we get inundated with so much visual, so much information, what we think is cool, what we think is beautiful. We forget to open our eyes and discover stuff for ourselves, and to be able to just go out and take a deep breath and really just look around.
Actually, this is a good time to now mention bus stops. But since you mentioned our mutual friend as well, Alistair, I believe Alistair met you on the road while you were photographing the bus stops.
Kind of. I mean, it was in Kazakhstan. He rocked up on our apartment doorstep, all soaking wet. He was biking around the world, and through a mutual friend, we got contact, and so he crashed on our sofa for I think like 4 weeks or so while he was trying to sort out his Iranian. Well, he never got the Iranian visa, but all his different visas. Yeah. And we had a great time hanging out. And then we went and we crossed Iceland together about 10 years ago. So I joined him on one of his adventures, which was great.
Well, I've seen the film that's doing the rounds at some of the film festivals. Actually, some of those who listen to this program in more Scandic countries will have perhaps had the pleasure of watching your film, actually, because it's been on distribution on television in some countries. Bus stops. Soviet bus stops at that. Who honestly could find interest in bus stops? But these aren't the breed of bus stops that frequent my road from the A4 from Newbury into Reading. No, these are Soviet period bus stops. And to give you a sense of what I mean by that, in the first minute of the film, I scrawled down furiously a Kazakhstan bus stop designer who said, "But these are visual poetry." They are visual poetry, but there will be people listening now thinking, how did you make a project out of this?
It started slowly. I mean, with this bike trip I was doing through Europe, in which I was looking for different things on the side of the road that sort of caught my fancy. And I must say that I really fell in love with the designs. Yeah. And it became more addictive over time. So when I biked through the Baltic countries, I found maybe 20 different examples of these sort of mainly concrete, but then as you come into Estonia, they were like more wood, and I found them really fascinating. But I think the key things that were, really drew me to these bus stops was a bit about the mystery about them as well. Yeah. Because I'd be traveling along a road somewhere in Kazakhstan in the middle of the steppe, and then all of a sudden there'd be this bus stop And it would sort of go against a lot of the things I kind of, expected or even my perception of what the Soviet Union was. It became this sort of scavenger hunt for me to find as many of these bus stops that I could, and especially different ones, because I think the more I would find, the stronger this collection would grow.
You're probably making the definitive map of where they are and where they once were, because as we'll uncover during our conversation, they are disappearing.
The thing with the bus stops is there isn't really a guide or a map, or they didn't really register, and so a lot of them you don't even know who made them, because a lot of it was sort of just local artists or road construction workers, and then some architects would give their input, but they might not actually be involved in the building process. So at the end of the day, it was a very loose and fairly free activity, all things considered, and which was a rare thing also during the Soviet Union. A lot of art and a lot of monumental architecture followed a lot of rules, and there wasn't always that much room for sort of individuality. But the bus stops were kind of seen as something that wasn't that threatening, and there was a lot more of an opportunity for people to let loose a little bit, and that really fascinated me. So yeah, I did. We lived in Central Asia for 3 years, and that was a great opportunity to sort of get this project going. I was working on a lot of other stuff and traveling around, and was never really 100% looking for the bus stops, but the whole joy of the project was it really then became a bit of a mission. So I'd be searching people's blogs, translating bus stop into every language I could think of, and then see if there was any threads or areas in which I could sort of pick up where they could be. And one point I was even like driving tens of thousands of kilometers on Google Maps, scouring the landscape, trying to find, and that would give me some leads. But in the end, I just had to go places and drive.
Well, there's a brutalist majesty to some of them. Some of them are huge, and some of them are very small, as you say. Some of them are, incredible, like the windmill one that you found that's made out of wood. In some respects, you were looking for a bit of a master plan in these designs of these Soviet bus stops. These incredible bits of art that the leaders of the communist state may have had, but there didn't seem to be a real master plan, did there? It seemed to be the further away from Moscow you were, perhaps the more you'd, can I use the phrase, get away with it?
Yeah, possibly. A lot of the decision-making came down to the different republics. So when you look at Georgia, for instance, Georgia's a fascinating example because their bus stops are some of the ones that are the oldest ones that I have found that sort of date back to the late 1960s, beginning of the 70s, and are really quite amazing. They're just over the top, especially along sort of the Black Sea coast. And the architect and artist who sort of led the projects, George Shakava, he at the time was the deputy minister of, I think it's called like Transportation and Highways or Road Construction.
Can you describe some of his creations?
Yeah, so some of his creations, it looks like it could be a spaceship coming from outer space. It's just like, it's concrete and it's got all these little almost spiky things around on the top. And then on the back, there's a mosaic that looks kind of almost sort of Gaudi-esque. And then he's got other ones, one that was just like an octopus.
The blue octopus.
Yeah. It literally is an octopus, kind of crawl underneath the octopus, and that's where you would wait for the bus. And then there's one I always get wrong what animal it is. I think it's supposed to be an elephant. They're so surreal and they're wild. So he really pushed all sorts of limits of creativity.
I was thinking initially that these bus stops, these Soviet bus stops, are so different, so hugely different, literally hugely different in some places, that they would be preserved, that people would look after them, that they would respect them for the art that they are. In some parts of the former Soviet Union, like Ukraine though, there's something that's far more sinister in terms of a sign of the oppression that they felt that they were under. So there's no real plan to protect these or preserve these, are there?
Yeah, no, there isn't any real preservation effort for them in most places. I mean, there in Georgia, there's a young architect called Nana Zalashvili. She has taken a keen interest in the bus stops as well, and her and some other colleagues and friends have managed to preserve some of the bus stops made by George Shakava, and it varies. I mean, in some places, as you said, they are a reminder of the Soviet Union, and that can be very hurtful, or they can just get run down. You know, people don't actually see them as maybe I see them, you know, and it is a little bit strange that it is, as a foreigner coming in there, that I get all excited about it, and people who live around it are just like, well, that's really normal, you know. And often people would actually be like offended that I was photographing them because they thought they were hideous, or they thought I was making fun of their community or of their area.
Yeah.
So on several occasions, you know, people have come and stopped me and said, like, what are you doing? Why are you photographing this? This isn't, you know, you're just going to take it back and show how dirty and essentially backwards or whatever, you know, we are. And I'm like, no, I think this is a beautiful piece of design and a beautiful piece of art. It's unique. It's, you know, I've never seen anything like this. Sometimes I'd be able to show them on the camera and just be like, okay, look here, I've been shooting for the last 2 weeks. These are all these different ones. Because I think for some people, you see the one bus stop and it's been there all the time, you know. But if you see hundreds of them, that power of the collection makes them stronger. And then you start seeing, okay, there are hundreds of these bus stops and each one is different. Each one is unique. Each one is striving to be an individual. Each one is, you know, trying not to copy or rip off other elements. They're actually just trying to be themselves. And that, you know, when you see all of that together, I think that has power and that has beauty to it. And that is also what gets me excited about finding another one. You know, it's just like, there's a valuable lesson to be learned there in the fact that we look so much to others and to, you know, likes and approval. And then everything just starts to kind of blend together and be what other people want, what else has been created. You know, there's a safety in that, you know. I mean, sure, granted, some of these bus stops by an aesthetic, artistic grading scale may be considered hideous. However, from a spirit of creation, I think they're gorgeous. You know what I mean? I just think they're brave and they're cool. They could fail as a bus stop, if you know what I mean. Like, the roof didn't have to completely keep you dry, or you know, it didn't have to have exactly the right interior space or seating. You know, it was a good mix between form and function, but sometimes they would be really functional. Sometimes, my gosh, they were totally open in the middle.
Yeah.
The roof is just a massive hole, you know, totally doesn't work as a bus stop. And he's just like, roof, no roof. I'm an artist. It's not my problem.
There seems to be a sort of, in the film anyway, sort of set up conflict resolution. It's a real 3-act story in many respects, particularly when, and I don't want you to give the answer away because I want people to see the film at some stage when they have the opportunity. But for example, there's one that eluded you for years up the top of a mountain. I'm being cautious here because I don't want to give what happened away. But those moments, I mean, I can say that you had to get out the car at one stage because it was just almost impossible to reach this place where you were hoping to find a bus stop. It's been quite the adventure in that respect, hasn't it?
It's been a heck of an adventure. And I think that's what makes, you know, some of the photos sweeter to me, at least, is the fact that, you know, we talked earlier about Alistair and his ideas of micro adventures and going local. You know, we kind of rethink what is it to be an explorer, what is it to be an adventurer. And for me, I had to go through incredible challenges to sometimes find and get these bus stops because there was no information sometimes, or because the roads were horrible. For me, that really gave me this, you know, I was an explorer. I was discovering something. You know, it's a bus stop made out of wood that can fit 2 people in it. But I felt like I just found the new world.
And Christopher Herwig joins me for part 2 of our conversation shortly. The rain has today brought out the birds. They're not really loud, but hopefully you can hear them in the background. And I've done some sort of strange loop. What was I on? I was on the wildlife walk, And this one is it's also the Wildlife Walk. I shall rename it Wildlife Walk with Midges. Looking ahead into the year now, we have a second week. I know I've been talking about this the last couple of weeks, but I'm so much looking forward to this. I absolutely adore the time I spend in Scotland each year. And I can say each year now because we've been there 2 years running for the Photowalk retreat. This will be our third year. And, it was so popular the first week, it filled up, boom, straight away. So I've released a second week. Now, obviously, that will take a little bit longer to fill, so I will mention it a few more times, if you'll indulge. Thanks very much. It's, with all the other Photowalk retreats we've done, this is the fifth retreat, celebrating the feeling our podcast brings to this community. An opportunity to escape the noise and spend time with like-minded photographers. We'll be embracing, as we do on this particular retreat, we embrace some new challenges. And we've introduced 2 more new challenges this year. We do have some returning who have been with us before. Judith and Kelly are coming back. Fantastic. So looking forward to Kelly bringing across from Canada. Not that it's a prerequisite, Kelly, for you being in attendance, but I do love all those stashes of what was it last time? Marzipan coffee. Come on, marzipan coffee. Whew. Now you're talking. Where was I? Yes, we do have some people who have experienced some of the things that we've done before, in particular the darkroom. This year, I'm making it my personal challenge to produce something on the first day of, because we photograph with film cameras on the first day. You don't have to own one. You'll be loaned one if you haven't got one. And I'm looking forward to making an art print to hang in the house this particular year. The last couple of years, I think I've made some reasonable stuff that I'm happy with anyway. But this year, I've got a plan, so I have. So that's one of those activities that if you haven't, it's a wonderful activity in so much that it's just I find it a very cathartic experience. I love being in the darkroom. I really do. It's funny in equal measure too, as anybody that's been in the darkroom with us on that retreat will recount. Paul, do you remember Paul Hudson, the first year in Scotland? And he knows what to do with a film camera. And I think it was we had a darkroom changing bag. That was it. And because Paul has somehow, something had happened to the film. I think it had snapped inside his camera. And so he had to take the film out in what is affectionately called Granny's knickers, which is a big black darkroom bag. That was a very funny moment. Paul, you did get some shots, didn't you, from that? I'm sure you did. I think you got some cracking pictures from your time out with a film camera. Anyway, we'll be doing that. Another thing that we're going to be doing this time is creative writing. One morning we're going to be taught by a professional writer, or necessarily taught, but mentored by a professional writer who's going to share some thoughts, I dare say some secrets as well on how to make your writing, I was going to say more potent, more creative. And I think that feeds into all forms of life whenever you write something, including, by the way, Instagram. When I look through Instagram, I do make a habit of reading what's been. I don't just casually swipe through. No, I like to read the stories, and I think it makes a huge difference if your writing is creative. So we'll be doing that. That's another thing, and sound, the sound of your pictures. I've talked about it on the retreats I've been on, and of course, making a podcast while I'm actually on retreat means that you get a ringside seat really to the process, and you're in it. You become a co-presenter. But this time, no, I want to take it a notch up and talk about how you can create photo stories with sounds. There are some details to be updated because we've had some good chats about it the last few weeks. I've updated the show page, or rather the retreat page. So if it sounds of interest to you, I would love to spend a week in September with you in Inverness, near Inverness, on a working soft fruit farm from where we can go and visit the most beautiful landscapes of Scotland. Right. Have I done the do there? I think I have. I think we've given it a nice mention. What's this? Yeah, I tell you what, macro, definitely. One of these photo walks, we can make it a mushroom extravaganza. We should actually try and come out with somebody who knows what they're talking about when it comes to mushrooms. Make a very interesting photo walk. Note to self, put that in the diary later on during the year. The beautiful greens are out on full display. There's some wonderful, I've made some pictures of some very mature oaks in this woodland. Look at them. Whoa, that's magnificent. If you'd like to send in a letter to the show, I would love to hear from you. It's the Photowalk show. Me with a camera, you with a camera, and me also taking out your letters so that we can see where you've been walking, the pictures that you've been making, the stories that you've been telling. You are what drives this, I think, very different sounding photographic podcast. So please keep sending in your letters. I adore receiving them, and I love reading what you have to say. Sometimes we don't get to your letters for a few months. I realise that, but we do get to them. Send them to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. If you would like to send in some pictures, I'm always pleased to receive those as well. Send those in the email. If you can resize, please do, to 2,500 pixels wide. Now, I have noticed of late there's a good few pictures that have been coming in that where I don't know, software, computers, gnomes under the hood, whatever's happening, have been resizing pictures to just 640 pixels wide or whatever, which is too small, unfortunately, for the show page, because by the time they, in a wizard-like fashion, made to look the same size as the other images, then they're all pixelated and like a sky. So please, if you can send me in full resolutions, if you're not quite sure how to optimize them, that's also appreciated. And I will do, as I say, the heavy lifting for you. Right. We have a new assignment for this month. I know we've been working on the same for a couple of months. It all got rather hectic in January and February, what with being in West Africa for some of that time. But before I set the new assignment, we need a picture that grabbed our attention from January and February, when and it's all one-word assignments this year. So I think that means it's going to be very open to interpretation, which in artistic terms is obviously a good thing. And the word that we had this last month, or February and January anyway, was resilience. And the pictures received, fabulous. I think we've uploaded them all. If yours is not there for some reason, do tell me. I shall go hunt for it. But I think we're there now. I think we're there. It was very tricky to choose one that particularly caught my eye, because I have to say, they all did, for very different reasons and very different stories. But I've chosen this story from Simon Blakesley, who is, I think he has the job of dreams, an aviation photographer, whose picture of resilience was something that, if I just say the words, it's a bit like saying bus stop. If I just say the word shopping trolley, you might think, what's resilient about a shopping trolley? Thinking of the bus stops, there was plenty of resilience in the pictures of bus stops, particularly where some of them are standing still to this day. Anyway, sorry, back to this. Yes, you might be saying, what's resilient about a shopping trolley? Well, let me read you the letter that came with the picture. Best greetings from Canada's Yukon Territory, Neil. Last week at short notice, my wife, Janine, and I drove the 2,000 kilometres or 1,200-mile journey back up the Alaska Highway, having flown down to purchase a new-to-us truck in Alberta and then drive it home. Now, I realise that people in different countries do things in different ways, but I suppose being in a much smaller country, I don't think, with lots of second-hand car dealers, I don't think there will be many people. My brother-in-law would. but he does things in a different way anyway. He would drive that far to go buy a car, but I don't know many people that would. This must have been very special. We made a 23-hour winter drive as enriching as possible by listening to the podcast. Oh, you flatterer, you. 4:20, the Gambian Retreat Special. 4:19, Do Something for Nothing. 4:18, Leaps of Faith and Finding Balance, as well as Caught Up on the Extra Mile. I'm sure you probably needed to listen to more on top of that. Thank you for making the multitude of miles go even faster. It was my pleasure. On one of the episodes, we took note of your request with respect to the resilience assignment, and attached is an image taken in January in our hometown of Whitehorse, Yukon, where I am photographer for the local airline, Air North. I have to tell you, Simon, that you get maximum brownie points, as the old phrase goes. Are you allowed to say that anymore? Is that right now? I don't know. For being an aviation photographer and being the official photographer for Air North. My son, Thomas, very, very impressed. You have the dream job, apparently. I think it was very. He didn't say it in so many words, but there was a moment where I'm sure he was going to say, "Why can't you be an aviation photographer instead of a wedding photographer, Dad?" He didn't say it, no, but I saw it in his eyes, I did. Well, while out running errands with Janine during the January cold snap, I was intrigued by the presence of this shopping cart. The picture is on the assignments page, not the show page, but the assignments page, frozen into the ice on the Yukon River. I commented that I felt that there was something there, perhaps a story waiting to be told. I assume that Janine humoured you somewhat. Yeah, why don't you go and make that picture of the trolley? I'm sure there is a story, darling, yes. I ruminated on the scene. Then a few days later, with an hour between shooting aircraft arrivals and departures on a near minus 40°C day, illegal temperature, I left the airport and headed to the river to see if I could make a photo or two of the shopping cart. We often never know the impact or reach a photo that we might make will have, and I certainly could never have imagined that this picture could spark the imagination of many. Because after posting the photo, which is vastly different than my usual aviation offerings, on my social media, I was contacted by the local branch of our national radio service, the CBC. An interview regarding the image ensued, which grew to include interviews with one of our local grocery store owners on the business aspects of losing shopping carts, a local shopping cart aficionado who knew that there was such interest out there, and a subsequent interview with a person who'd written a poem based on my photo. I learned far more than I ever thought there was to know about shopping carts. You see? There was a story there. Your wife, Janine, she knew that as well. She clearly knew that, even though she did send you back later to do it. I'm not waiting here while you go across a lake and photograph a shopping cart. Thanks very much. We've got stuff to do. The story aired locally and was also carried nationally across Canada on other CBC radio shows. Given your interest in stories and the recording of them, I've included a link to a 7-minute interview to help round out the story, which I ended with my suggestion that the image was symbolic of the resilience of Yukoners. The link to that interview, by the way, that will be on the assignments page 2 with this photograph that's at the very top. It loosely carries the term winner. It is a winner, insofar as it's the one that really caught my eye, imagination, and with that story as well, doubly, triply so. And well done, Simon. There is a famous, not so famous show flask winging. Do you like what I did there? You're an aviation photographer. Come on, link them together, Simon. Winging its way to you. We should actually put it on one of the airliners that flies in from the Yukon to here. Put it on special. Send it. No, all right. Right, the assignment for this month. I'm going to welcome back Christopher Herwig in a moment. I asked him to set an assignment. I thought this was the one that might be next month's, but actually I love it. I love it so much that I'm just going to use it this month. And I think it does play in very much to the narrative of our conversation. So here's what you have to do for March.
The Photowalk assignment.
This year, our assignments have taken on a different form. They are one-word assignments. So we'll give you a word, interpret that word, and then take it out and make a photograph. Christopher, I think you're very well placed to set a one-word assignment for this month. What will that word be?
I've chose the word overlooked.
I like it.
And yeah, I think, just to give a little explanation, I think there's so many times that as photographers, we either go out on an assignment or we go looking for photographs, and we want to have some ideas. We want to have done some homework. We have some preconceived notions of what we're going to photograph.
Yeah.
We go out and there's things that we would just never photograph. And those are kind of the things that just become overlooked, and they, for various reasons. To try and find value and meaning out of some of these objects or people, I think for me, has been an incredible experience as a photographer. And it not only, challenges your creative ability in terms of making these overlooked items exciting, but it also, there's a storytelling aspect about it. It's these unsung heroes, these underdogs, whether it's a person, whether it's an object, whether it's a place. Yeah.
Overlooked. I like it.
Okay.
Good luck with your assignments. Looking forward to receiving them. Send them to stories@photowalk.show. Just through, I can't get to it because there's a fence here, and they are very serious about their forestry here. They've had some problems with ash dieback, and anyway, so I don't want to cross any boundaries when I shouldn't be. But there's a mushroom that's growing at the top of a silver birch that's been a very young silver birch that's been cut back. It's almost like it's kind of like I don't know. It looks like something from Little Shop of Horrors. It's got a mouth on it. I dare go too close. I might get eaten by a wild mushroom. Neil, are you sure you've not already been eating them? With that observation, let me get a picture. I don't think I'm going to get close enough really to do it any justice. So what I'll do, in the foreground, there's a bit of there's a bit of foliage, but that's too low. There's some twigs, which could, I suppose, at a push, they could frame it slightly. And because I really want to try and isolate this, because I'm not as close as I would like to be, I'm going to, the widest I can go on this is f2.8, which because there's, what would that equate to? That's going to be about f4, isn't it? Once it's been through the converter. Anyway, let me just focus up here. I'm using focus peaking, set on white. You didn't get a choice in any of the X Pro 1 models to go any other colour. I usually like to focus peak with red, but here we go. 500th of a second since I've opened up much wider, ISO 320. Let's just put that right on the third. I don't know whether you're going to get the effect of this this mouth. I hope you will. There we go. Another sketchbook. Making far more sketchbooks than usual today. Maybe it's the effect of taking out a different camera sometimes, having a bit of a play. I do love my X100V, but sometimes it's nice to change it up a bit, isn't it? That's not my way of saying I'm about to buy the X100VI, although I would dearly like to add that to the bag. Anyway, good luck for the where were we? Good luck for the assignment for this month of March. It's very wide open to interpretation, this one. It really is. Right, letters. Here's one from Craig Stevenson. Message. Neil, greetings from Franconia land, here in the USA. I looked up Franconia because the Franconia I know is part of Germany. But your Franconia is New Hampshire, isn't it? I hope so. And has the most fantastic mountain range. I've got the right Franconia, haven't I? The one that I saw, that I was looking up, it was very late last night actually, so please tell me it wasn't one of those moments where I was looking at a different place. Anyway, the Franconia that I think I'm talking about, frankly, that's Photowalk Central. It really is. Anyway, back to Craig. I stumbled upon your podcast a few months ago and I've been binging on it ever since. There is a cure. I'm a former film shooter who became lost with the advent of digital photography, and for years I muddled around with various crossover and point-and-shoot cameras. I lost my mojo, really, I suppose. Then the photo bug bit me again when I discovered the Fujifilm line of cameras. As I said, I think last week, this is not the Fujicast, but I know that we have a fair amount of Fujifilm users, which is always nice. And I felt this was a flashback to my film days. And I thought, yes, my life has photographic purpose once again. Anyway, the point of my letter is, at the start of the show, you go through your checklist. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check, and so on. And I'm thinking, what on earth is a Garibaldi? So off to the worldwide wonder I went, and found Garibaldi's are the British version of the dear departed Sunshine Baking Company's golden fruit biscuits. I used to have them at my grandmom's house when I visited as a child. So golden fruit is kind of the Americanized Garibaldi. Yes, I looked. I did. I thought, right, there can't be another Garibaldi. There's only one. I mean, I know there's variations of, in terms of theme and different kinds of ingredients here and there, but this has some sort of filling. It's a sort of it looks like the schmore of fruit biscuits. They're like supercharged baldies, these are. Anyway, talk about flashback, Neil. It nearly really brought me to tears. I immediately ordered some Garibaldis from Amazon, and at this very moment, I'm having them with a cup of tea and luxuriating in a flood of memories of my times with Grandmom. I will forever be grateful to you, Neil, for this. I'd love to see some pictures of you and Grandmom. I really would. I like all that legacy stuff. And I suppose the only way to properly express my gratitude, says Craig, is to become an extra miler. I'm going to ask a favour of you, Craig. I need you, I'm hoping I've got the right Franconia now, I need you to get out to those mountains and make some pictures for us. They look incredible. Right. Second and concluding part of today's conversation with my guest, Christopher Herwig, a man committed to photographing the beauty of life that others may just walk on by. Cue song. And, well, in this part, I think that call to action in terms of making pictures of things that you otherwise sometimes might just walk on past, I think a call to action really comes across. Here's the second part of my chat with Christopher Herwig.
Can you imagine in most countries, certainly in this country, if you thought, we need a bus stop, let me go and build one that's like in the shape of an octopus, where that doesn't really hide anybody from the rain, it would be torn down by the local council. It's amazing. Can I ask the elephant in the room question, though? We travel in Russia now nigh on impossible, and I'm not sure if you've now stopped. I mean, that we have a do not travel level 4 advice alert for Russia. More are going to be disappearing all the time. And I don't know. I mean, it seems rather unpalatable to place the importance of photographing bus stops in the same sentence as an ongoing war. But your feelings about the project? Do you want to go back and do more? Because there's more to see.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think for the most part, I'm done. But I mean, if I had the opportunity to go and find more,
you would.
I mean, I do enjoy it, and I would do it because I mean, I think there is. And I mean, I got an email from someone the other day and they're like, yeah, I was biking around the Ukraine, 5 years ago, saw your project. I saw some buses on the side of the road. Do you want me to share them with you? And I'm just like, yes, send me what you saw, I'm totally curious to see what's out there. Yeah. What I might have missed or, I might mention it in the film at one point, but there is, I still have reoccurring dreams that I'm out on the road looking for bus stops. And then inside my dream imagination, I somehow create a new bus stop. And then I wake up in the morning and I'm just like, that was a beauty, it's like, but it doesn't exist. But it was just, and so I think that the spirit of it, I think was something that was beautiful to experience and to be a part of. But they are just bus stops at the end of the day. And I mean, there's much bigger problems going on in the world. And so, if people want to tear them down in the Ukraine, because they, remind them of Russian rule and the Soviet Union, then yeah.
You did manage to get some pictures in Chernobyl, which is a place I would imagine many people will not be able to go for many, many years. now. There was one by the plant, which was, I mean, that was so colourful.
Yeah, there's one just right outside of the administrative building.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, amazing, incredible. And then there's some further out in the forests that appear to have no houses or anything near to them.
Yeah.
Dare I ask, and perhaps I should have asked this before, there will be photographers, me included, asking this internally, so I'm going to vocalise it. How do you even go about funding a project like this? I think you may have suggested that it's part of a larger picture of other projects you're working on at any one time in the world. But it's a mammoth project, this. I mean, the film is it's a 1-hour film. And as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, this is a life's work.
I mean, it started as a passion project. I funded it myself as sort of going out and doing these trips. But when I started to go back and hunt them, specifically to find these bus stops to do the first book, I did create boundaries for the project and said, okay, I'm going to go out. I've already got these pictures in the bag already from when I sort of tagged them along with other projects. I'm going to go for 3 weeks, but I'm going to make sure that they are super effective 3 weeks. I'm going to do as much homework as I can. I'm going to drive from sun up to sundown. I'm going to work my butt off. So the expenses don't, completely balloon. I'm sleeping in the car. And so I did that with the first book, at least on the production side of getting the pictures. And then to produce the book, I sent it out to a lot of publishers. And they're all like, Soviet bus stops, fabulous idea. But like, no. No. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to, just self-publish this on Blurb or somewhere where the printing costs are ridiculous and I make $2 on a book or something. If this is going to be a book, I want people to actually want it. Yeah. So I put it out on Kickstarter. This is maybe in 2013 or something, 2014. So this was the first book. And it actually did ridiculously well. I don't know exactly why. I mean, I think people liked the topic. People liked possibly my enthusiasm and my passion and the fact that I guess I didn't 100% care if people liked it. I liked it. And I wanted this to really be, this was my project. And if there was going to be a book, then that's fine. If not, I had my fun. It's kind of like you go to the casino. I've got $50. If I lose the money out of that, that's okay. I had my entertainment. That was my, so going around and photographing, that was the entertainment. If it becomes a book, I want the public to pay for it. I'm not going to pay for the book. And fair enough. It was a successful book. And then within the first week of the Kickstarter campaign, then Fuel, publisher in London, they contacted me. And since then, we've worked on sort of the first book was republished in more of a commercial format. And then we did a second volume and we did Soviet Metros. In terms of the film, I mean, that was a bit more of a labor of love. I did it with 2 friends who joined me for the second book. And for me to do the second book of Bus Stops, I also didn't want to do it alone. I thought, okay, well, this is a fun thing to do, but I want to share the experience with some friends, and we'll just do it as like sort of an ultimate road trip. So they were keen on coming along. It was Nick Zaitchik and Christopher Heinzwald. Yeah. And then the part of the film that I'm really quite proud of is actually the music. It's this Latvian band.
It's fantastic.
Called Zodiac, and their story is incredible as well. I mean, and it sort of also captures this. Just this, a little bit of the theme of the film is that the Soviet Union wasn't, there was a lot that made up the Soviet Union. There were Latvians, there were Kazakhs, there were Armenians, there were Ukrainians, and there were individuals and artists. They experimented with things. And this band, there was a bunch of students in music school. And they got this guy in Riga to make them a synthesizer, like a keyboard, because they couldn't get them into the Soviet Union because of embargoes and stuff. And supposedly he made it out of like used military parts. And I don't know how he pieced it together. And they pumped out this album, which had like massive success in the Soviet Union, partially because it didn't have any words in it. So there was nothing really that could be censored or like or political about it. And so the lead of this band, Yanis Lusin, and his son, Yanis Lusin Jr., they did the soundtrack for the film. And then so to actually pay them and some of the other music that was in the film, we did a Kickstarter. Again, I turned to Kickstarter to sort of, so I wouldn't go into debt on the film. And we pressed a vinyl LP of the soundtrack.
Oh, which is available.
Yeah, I mean, it was a limited edition run, so there's just a few copies left probably. But it's also, I mean, as a photographer, it's your dream always to do an album cover, and just there's so much real estate there for beautiful photography. So that was just really fun to do. So we're really happy with that, and there are still some available at Fuel's website.
There's a size you bring to the world within your pictures, Christopher. Kazakhstan, the Pamir, the Cape Coast of Ghana pictures, which I love. Vast sand mountains in China. I mean, I could just list places you visited, which you can see clearly within your online portfolio. Suffice to say that your pictures show an absolute desire to get in and amongst the world, I would say. And most importantly, the people. Are you as fascinated about the world and the places you visit? I mean, look at these adventures you've been on. Are you as fascinated now as ever you were? That's
a good question. I mean, I think the more you travel and the more you see things, the more you want to see new things. Yeah. And that is a challenge. I really loved the bus stop project because it was something to really give me a reason to travel and to go to places I never would go to and find these little fabulous creations.
Well, bus stops was an accidental find in Lithuania, wasn't it? Really? I mean, that wasn't anything you were searching for.
No, exactly. And I think that's the key, is just to kind of have that, have that confidence or have that like level of expectancy that you don't need to, I don't need to find another bus stop series. I just need to start going out there and finding things that I can actually get excited about and that can give travel for me meaning again and photography for me meaning and excitement again. And yeah, and the only way to do that is to actually get out there and walk the streets and hop on a bike and you've worked with agencies like the UN in some of the most challenging regions. Your desire, I'm going to quote you here, your desire is to put a human face to their statistics and bring project proposals to life, which is very heartening, really, that this is at the very heart of what photography can do, to put a human face to stories. That seems to me to be something that you are driven by. And whether you're looking for a bus in the next bus stop project or not, that's a skill that you have, a communication skill. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what gives value to or imagery is when there is to find the artists behind the bus stops and to find a little bit of their story. I think that really helped sort of build on just the ability to appreciate them and to, see them as something that is a bit more of a celebration of the individual spirit. I think when we go out and we photograph or we look for stories, we often try and find things that are just so sensational and so exciting that we forget that just everyday people are actually beautiful and interesting. And it might not at the end of the day be something that is earth-shattering or, they didn't jump in the river and save someone from a crocodile or something. It might be a dad in a refugee camp in Bangladesh and he makes out of, some twigs, a crib for his, to keep his son off the cold ground and to swing with it. But it just shows like, a little bit of creativity, a little bit of, resilience and it's a simple thing, but at the same time, it's not, it is. It's incredible. It's those little moments and those little objects, I think, that we can give more attention to and present them in ways in which they are heroes.
Well, I think then you may have answered this question. It's the one I always end my conversations with. It's the why question, which can be a why do you do this? Why photography? Why the fascination for subjects? But as I said, there was a quote at the end of your film, which I wrote down. I absolutely love this. And I can't remember who it's attributed now, which is terrible. I didn't note that bit down. It's like music. Not only are loud and big objects important, but also the pauses and the quiet, the small things. So I'm thinking in many ways, as you've just said, that's your why, isn't it? Or is it? Is there a larger why behind why you photograph?
No, I mean, I love that line. I mean, it was from a Belarusian architect called Armen Saratov, who I visited several times, and he was a very colorful character and always was very deep in his thoughts about the bus stops. And he was the one who also came up with the poetry of the road idea that these bus stops were part of. And I love his comparison to the bus stops or road architecture being like music. Because I often, you feel that one sometimes when you're driving by and you're looking outside and you see things passing by and like, there's a rhythm to it. There's a flow to it. And to be able to sum up in words, as you said, this feeling that life isn't just about the loud and the big, it's not just about the supermodels. It's not just about the castles and the monumental architecture or famous football players, or it is about it is about the little things and how everything everything works together, and there is beauty in those spaces in between and those smaller things. The way he compares that to music is brilliant, because even though the loud noises in a song maybe are the things that get the most attention, it's all the other things that make it work as a song or as a composition. It is the whole package. And a carefully placed pause or a tiny little note can have as much impact as a ripping guitar solo. And that's something to think about. And I think we forget that, and we're missing out on so many little things. And I mean, I think, we can spend more time just exploring the things that we take for granted. And I think photography is a great way to do it. If it becomes something, or if it just becomes a mindful way of opening your eyes to your neighborhood, or you go to Venice or you go to some tourist destination, sure, see the main attraction, but then get completely lost. Just wander. Forget the map, forget anything. You'll find your way home eventually. And just wander and look what you're going to find. Don't have a destination.
I like that.
There's a song by Leonard Cohen, Suzanne. And there's a line in there where it's like, and you want to travel with her and you want to travel blind. And that line, you want to travel blind, I think resonates a lot for me, because, you don't want to be ignorant, but at the same time, you don't want to have so many preconceived notions or ideas or itineraries that your trip is done before you get there. If you've already planned it and you're going up the Eiffel Tower and you're going to go here, see the Louvre and that, and you're ticking these boxes, but what new did you experience? Like sometimes you really need to travel blind and just get lost a little bit and see what you can find and see where it leads you.
And my thanks to Christopher Herwig for talking to us on the Photowalk podcast this week. And my thanks to you for joining us as well. I'm really enjoying using this X Pro 1 camera today. I have to say, it sort of reminds me a little bit, and I've asked for it back. I haven't received it yet. A very good friend of mine has, I think, my original 5D. I didn't realise it was my original 5D, but she said, she thinks it is the original 5D that I owned, the Canon 5D, which I always lauded for its I'm going to use a phrase that's so over. Oh God, look at this. Hang on. I need to get past this big puddle. There we go. For its it's often described as having a sort of creamy-like texture in terms of the way it resolves colour. And sorry, I'm just stooping underneath some branches to sort of bypass the puddle there. There we go. I wouldn't normally worry, but there's a hole in my... Yeah, we've done that bit. This X Pro 1 is sort of behaving in a similar fashion. I'm seeing through the viewfinder as I'm making the pictures, I'm getting a very different experience. Are you, Neil? Yes, I am. Right, what way does this path go? One way is back to car. I'm here. Where? Here. No, you're nowhere near here, that's for sure. And one way's further into the woodland. I've done a fair bit of exploring today. Let's take this way. I can always make some more pictures if I've turned the wrong way. If you can't wait until next Friday and you want to walk a little further, then the Extra Mile edition 422 is waiting for you. The numbers of the Extra Mile now tally with the addition of the Photowalk. But there's not a third part, actually, of my chat with Christopher today, but there is the concluding part of the conversation that started last week with Adrian Catanese, one of our extra milers from the US. And today our conversation talks about, amongst other things, photographs that perhaps define our love for this thing. The pictures that are our legacy, those really precious pictures, I suggested, well, maybe this is just me, I suggested that there are probably a handful of pictures that are so very precious to me, that really do speak to me about my photographic experience, both professionally and as a hobbyist as well.
On this week's Extra Mile,
I had never photographed a politician before. I had never photographed inside a house of government. I had never done anything like this in any capacity. And it is something that I know that photography enabled me to do that, because I think one of the great things about photography is it gives you an excuse and a pretense under which to connect with people. The camera became my passport to meet this person who made history, and I now consider him a friend. We keep in touch a little bit. And it was it felt good to make that portrait. To photograph is to experience life, and to be able to experience life is a gift, right? So being able to photograph is a privilege.
The Extra Mile is part of our private Patreon channel, where our wonderful community of supporters, our walkers, our photographers who want to help keep this podcast here week after week, make a generous monthly, or you can now do it annually as well, annual contribution. Treat it like it's being part of a photographic club. Yeah, that's probably a good way to think about it, actually. Right, our PS is to come. But before that, we need a play-out song, just to make some final frames to. And, this makes absolute sense today to use some music from the album that you heard mentioned within the conversation with Christopher Herwig today, that is also on Spotify. There's a joy to owning vinyl, yes, for sure, but also it is on Spotify. Just in case you don't have one of those things called a record player. A record player, Dad? What's a record player? The album is called Soviet Bus Stops by Yanis Lucens and Yanis Lucens Jr. Now, there's music on there that makes perfect sense when you watch the film, because it's cinematically suited to various scenes of the film. And when I was listening back through the album the other day, I thought, oh yes, I remember that moment and that moment and that moment. So some of the themes perhaps wouldn't make the perfect play-out song, but this one works really well. It's entirely instrumental. And it's a song to go make some more pictures by. And this one from the album is called Winds of Joy. Yanis Lucens and Yanis Lucens Jr. From the album which was mentioned on the show. There will be a link on the show page today. I'm looking forward to walking more with you right now on the Extra Mile, actually. It's a programme like this one, only a bit shorter, and a chance for us to share some exclusive bits, and you get to hear those more shows that we were mentioning earlier on, if that's your thing, of course. A whole archive of thoughts from the studio. Just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. My promise to you is to keep building this community of kindness. It's really important to me. It really is. It's become, like bus stops. is Christopher's project. This has become mine. And I mean that in no small measure. I truly, honestly, genuinely believe that. I really feel it's a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we love, photographing and walking with a boot with a hole in it. Now, on the show page, there are some very handy buttons that help you share the show. They're underneath the player, so be sure to press that follow or subscribe button on your podcast app as well. And my thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell with Emily Renier, who look after our Facebook members. And I'm being serenaded beautifully. What are they? They are... Oh, are you a blue tit or are you a martin? Ooh, I find that difficult. My dad would have known. Don't you know, son? All those hours in bird hides. Right, a postscript for the show. I don't know who to attribute this to. Actually, there wasn't a name, but I do think it's absolutely perfect. It does, however, give me a slight flick on the nose for having used the word obsessed or obsession in the introduction, because that can have slightly negative connotations, and I don't think there's anything negative about this beautiful passion that Christopher has for, well, I'm going to describe it as his life project, because I don't think, even though the second book is out and the film is out, from listening to Christopher, I don't think that this is yet complete, not in his mind at any rate. So here's today's PS, which I think is perfect in terms of today's story. Obsessed is a word the lazy use to describe the dedicated.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.